G'day and welcome to this version, which is the inaugural version of This Week in Review. Let's get straight into it, and the big news in Australian politics was, first of all, Cory Bernardi, who quit the Liberal Party rather sensationally. But this wasn't unexpected, it was expected for some amount of time. Let's listen to Cory Bernardi.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Bernardi.
Mr President, I seek leave to make a statement not exceeding 5 minutes.
Is leave granted? There being no objection, leave is granted. Senator Bernardi.
Thank you. Mr President, I rise to inform the Senate that this morning I resigned as a member of the Liberal Party. I consider it my duty to inform the Senate of this decision prior to making any public comment. After a membership spanning my entire adult life, having been a state president and a federal vice president of the party, this has been a very difficult decision for me, perhaps the most difficult one of my political life. I stand here today both reluctant and relieved.
So Senator Bernardi goes on to outline the reasons which anyone who's a follower of Australian politics will realise. He has long been against the left leanings of Malcolm Turnbull and a lot of his cabinet, and it's unfortunate, I guess, for Senator Bernardi to have to make the ultimate decision. Now, there was the usual response from Labor, the Greens, and from the Liberal Party themselves.
This is a government that is riven by factionalism, by dissent and distrust. This resignation is a consequence of the failure of leadership by the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister is leading a government that doesn't have an agenda, that doesn't have a philosophical framework. This is a government led by a man who has sold his soul for leadership.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Brandis.
Thank you, Mr President. The Liberal Party, the Coalition, the Government are disappointed by the course that Senator Bernardi has taken this morning. We believe that he has done the wrong thing.
So no surprises there. Senator Bernardi has done the wrong thing, according to Senator Brandis QC, which you'd expect is the company line, isn't it? But now Senator Brandis is going to do all this sort of faux act whenever someone does this sort of thing, that, well, look, you were elected as a member of the Liberal Party, therefore you need to turn in your senator's hat and go to a by-election, which no one does, no one expects anyone to do, and there's no argument whatsoever that Mr Bernardi isn't representative of the people who put him there, rather than the party.
Because only 7 months ago, Senator Bernardi was elected by the people of South Australia to serve in the Senate as a Liberal senator. There is a variety of views in the Liberal Party, as there is a variety of views in the Labor Party. But only 7 months ago, Senator Bernardi was happy to stand before the people of South Australia and to say that he sought their endorsement to serve for a 6-year term as a Liberal senator.
So no surprises there. I suspect the same old argument. Look, if you are going to leave the party, then you should go to an election.
Senator Di Natale.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, in Senator Bernardi we have 6.5 foot of ego, but not an inch of integrity. Not an inch. I would have respected that speech if he'd given it a year ago, before he stood as a Liberal Party candidate and waited to get himself a 6-year term in the Senate. What a hypocrite, coming in here talking about ensuring that he's there representing the values of people who have conservative views, when he himself has shown himself to be a person lacking in integrity and substance.
Of course, that same integrity and substance wasn't an issue when Craig Thomson was relied upon to prop up the Greens and Labor government under Julia Gillard. And of course that same substance when it comes to the Labor Party. Remember these two people? That's Prime Minister Rudd and Prime Minister Gillard, and on the right is Prime Minister Rudd again. But of course the same could be said about the knifing of Tony Abbott by Malcolm Turnbull. Really, do we vote for a leader? Well, probably in practice, yes. But technically, do we? No. We vote for a party, and the party promotes the leader. So integrity, well, I'm not sure that the Greens or Labor, or the Liberal Party for that matter, should be yammering on about that too much. But of course all this internal strife within the Liberal Party caused Malcolm Turnbull to consider his position, which looked increasingly precarious, as there could have been a lot of the right in his party which would assault him. So he came out swinging against Mr. Shorten, and probably for the first time ever made an actually interesting parliamentary dispatch box approach to how to do politics. It was a little Paul Keating-esque, if you don't mind me saying.
The Prime Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we've just heard from that great sycophant of billionaires, the Leader of the Opposition. All the lectures he's trying to run a politics of envy. When he was a regular dinner guest at Raheen, always there with Dick Pratt, sucking up to Dick Pratt. Did he knock back the Cristal? I don't think so. There was never a union leader in Melbourne that tucked his knees under more billionaires' tables than the Leader of the Opposition. He lapped it up. Oh yes, he lapped it up.
Members on my
he
right.
was such a sycophant, a social climbing sycophant.
And so on and so forth does our Prime Minister Savage, Bill Shorten. Probably Malcolm Turnbull's best effort ever at the dispatch box, and that stupid grin which you get from Bill Shorten from time to time. I think the last time I saw it so pathetic was when he was in front of the Royal Commission and Dyson Hayden was telling him he doesn't come across as credible. Anyway, over to South Australia, which, believe it or not, has the power on today. Let's see what Premier Weatherill has to say.
This is totally and utterly unacceptable, and it didn't need to happen. One thing that's absolutely clear to us is that South Australia is now on its own in relation to the national electricity market. It's on its own because the National Energy Market Operator is unable to run a system which can guarantee us security of electricity supply. We also know we're on our own because the Prime Minister and his colleagues in the Federal Parliament have spent the whole week essentially ridiculing South Australia.
Well, not exactly ridiculing South Australia, more ridiculing you, Premier. How do you expect South Australia to have the power on all the time if you refuse to build new coal-powered stations, you refuse to build nuclear, you refuse to build gas-fired, and then you rely entirely on wind and solar? Wind and solar, wind doesn't work unless the wind blows. Solar doesn't work unless the sun's shining. You are going to have to accommodate your baseload power. So what have you been relying on? The national grid. In other words, buying electricity from Victoria, which generates that very electricity from brown coal. Brown coal is the dirtiest of coal. So this hypocritical ideological drive, oh, we've got to have renewable energy, we're going to set a target. So South Australia sets a target for renewable energy, and what happens? They haven't got the capacity to deal with their own baseline power. And what does Premier Weatherill want to do? He wants to blame everyone except himself. It's the national regulator, because they can't guarantee power. Do you blame Canberra for scoffing and mocking you, Premier? Premier, it's your responsibility to power South Australia. It's no one else's.
oh, man.
Now we pop over to the United States of America, and this is a picture of the University of Berkeley, California. Now, Berkeley had a rather proud history of being a centre of freedom of speech, but unfortunately that's rather changed now with the advent of this guy. This is Milo Yiannopoulos, for those of you in Australia who don't know who he is. And he started off as an internet troll. Eventually he moved to Breitbart, which is a conservative news organisation, and he was famously banned from Twitter. Now, the net result of him being banned from Twitter is that his popularity went through the roof. Now, at Berkeley last week, he was invited along by a conservative student group to give a speech in this bastion of free speech. Now, of course, the usual left-wing protesters turned out, but it turned less into a protest and more into a full-scale riot. Let me show you what I mean.
News begins with a showdown over free speech on the Cal campus. A polarizing pundit just a couple hours away from taking the stage, but protesters are vowing to shut down the show. Good evening, I'm Veronica Dela Cruz.
I'm Alan Martin. A live look from Chopper 5 for you. Extra security on hand at UC Berkeley tonight, ahead of an appearance by ultra-conservative columnist Milo Yiannopoulos. The crowd has grown larger just within the past 30 minutes. Now we see campus police taking up positions there, protesters trying to tear down the barricades. KPI X-Files Phil Mateer on campus. Phil, we saw what happened a few weeks back at UC Davis. The rowdy protest there seems like could be similar thing tonight.
Well, it is a minority group that just came in a little while ago, Alan. They do not represent everybody here, but I have to say that the purpose of the demonstration is to shut this down. That is why they're here. It's not just a protest, but to shut it down. And now they've just taken off the floodlights, and they're going for the last barrier between the protesters and the student union. Over to our left, we see the police lined up.
Those look like fireworks going off, and they're spraying what looks like a fire extinguisher.
One floor, as far as we know, the only people in there are possibly police and officials.
And do we know where Milo Yiannopoulos is at this point?
Systematically cutting the... No, we don't know if he's in the building or not. I saw some of the young Republicans who are hosting the event. They were escorted in by police before this broke out. All right, here we go with another assault on the building. It looks like they're just going to go straight at it now, with the sticks as we talked about before and the battering rams.
And Phil, one of the questions, obviously...
by being here, and I think the protesters are doing the same. And props to them for the ones who are doing it non-violently, but I think that's a very rare thing in the inside.
Are you surprised?
Our legislation.
Fuck with us, we'll fuck with you.
The guy was just trying to talk to. I mean,
Now, if anyone can tell me that that is a demonstration, in other words, some sort of form of demonstrating your feelings about a certain matter, then why have they got sticks? Why are their faces covered? Why are they dressed in black, looking like stormtroopers? Why are they firing explosive pyrotechnics at the police? Why are they throwing rocks at the police? And there was this sort of subtle comment from one of the reporters who said, oh, it's not all of them. Some of them are peaceful. No. As soon as a riot starts, you disperse. If you do not disperse, you are part of the riot. You can't stand on the sidelines of a riot and say, look, I wasn't involved. I'm not doing it. I didn't throw any stones. I didn't hit anyone. I didn't spray a woman in the face with pepper spray. No. You disperse once the riot starts. What sort of a decent person would want to stay in the company of these thugs? these spineless thugs who cover their faces to shut down free speech. And that is what it is all about.
Oh, man. Whoa.
And finally for this week, I need to award my Pinocchio Award. And for smokers in Australia, this will be a long and painful story. Over time, the Australian governments of both sides have added taxes, levies, and all sorts of imposts on tobacco products. Why? Oh, they want to save our lives, of course. They want to be making sure that we don't end up in hospital due to smoking-related diseases, and it's got nothing at all to do with the huge amounts of revenue that it brings in. Well, here's just a shot from the National Press Club where Malcolm Turnbull was talking.
Jobs and to a growth in the economy was a difficult sell. You're now trying to convince people that cutting company tax cuts will lead to lower taxes for people, lead to more jobs and better economic growth. Is that a difficult sell for you? Is that the big agenda item for this year, to convince people of that difficult sell? And how's progress going with that, with the crossbench?
Well, Mark, let me put it this way. This is actually a pretty straightforward proposition. If you want to have less of something, tax it more. You know, what happens when you increase tax on cigarettes? You get less smoke. That's a fact. Government gets more revenue too, but Treasurer's smiling. But you get less smoking. So if you want less of something, increase the tax on it. If you want